At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
15th August 1947, at midnight hour, Mr. Nehru announced the transfer of power from the British government to the Congress Party of India. 1947 was 90 years after the first war of independence of 1857. It was also 190 years after the Battle of Plassey and 340 years after the arrival of the British in Bharat. In 1947, we got independence after 90 years of British rule. But we, as the people of Bharat, were enslaved for the last 1000 years. And the independence we got was after the slavery of 1000 years. Since unknown years mentioned in the early Rigvedic hymns, to Ramayana, to Mahabharata, to Buddha, to Adi Shankaracharya, to King Vikramaditya, till Prithviraj Chauhan. Many years of pure riches and wealth. Architecture, textile, food, jewelry, and also great valor. The entire world viewed Bharat as heaven on earth. Ships from Abyssinia, Ghana, Rome, China, ships from everywhere anchored at the ports of India. People from all over the world came to India to study in universities like Nalanda, Takshashila, Sharda Peeth and many more. Every village had a temple which was a place of worship as well as a place to study. India was also known for its great valor. Our kings literally cut people in half with one hack of the sword or the khanda. Our kings were so furious after the death of a very important king and the massacre of his people that they went to raid till the other side of Iran, which is the border of Iraq. Turks, Arabs, Central Asians, no one was spared. Everyone was cut down by the khadgas of who fought for dharma, and their blood was offered to Ma Kali. And then one mistake took this great civilization to such a state where the women weren't safe, where the wealth was not used for the people but for the Sultan, who looted India for their own benefit. Immense plunder of indigenous people, culture and wealth took place with massacre of thousands. And then one day the sun rose with a cry of a legend, a Mahapurush. A son was born to the house of Bhosles. This son of Mahabharati grew up as the killer of foreign demons. After the death of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and the tragic death of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, it was his name and the vengeance of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj which led the Marathas to establish the dharmic rule where every culture was respected, women were safe, sciences were taught again, and Vedic hymns and classical music was sung melodiously in the temples. Freedom was brought back to India. The name Shivaji Maharaj is very important because not only that he brought back freedom, his name and his legacy also led the fight against the British during the British era. Singing the songs of his valor, visiting his forts, everything was banned so that people won't get inspiration. In 1857, it was the word Swarajya which was coined by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. It was used by Nana Sahib Peshwa to unite all the Hindu Samans, the Sardars and Rajas to unite against the British Empire. Unfortunately, the War of 1857 failed, but it created a spark amongst many youngsters which would grow up and lay down the base of the freedom of India. After we lost the first war of independence, the British made sure that the Indians were westernized. But then, a name was heard in the valleys of Sahyadri, Vasudev Balwanta Phadke. He was a person who rampaged his way from Pune to Pandharpur, plundering the British treasury and the zamindars who were British puppets. He wanted to repeat the phenomenon and the events of 1857, but unfortunately he failed. But this man was a legend. As young women and men grew up listening to his stories and the stories of 1857, the spark was created amongst the people. Now it was the responsibility of these new people to spread the word amongst everyone in India. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal were three names which came forward in this period. They were the people who influenced the youngsters to start a movement for the freedom of the motherland. The bombings of Muzaffarpur, the murder of W.C. Rand was some of the incidents which happened after taking inspiration from these three great men. Khudiram Bose, Prafulla Chaki, the Chapekar brothers, Bharin Ghosh, how many names should I take? Go and read about these people. Arbindu Ghosh, Bharin Ghosh and Savarkar were the three names of the people who led the next stage of Indian independence. The youngsters were all set and ready to fight and die for the motherland. But now was the time to train. The akhadas, which was a web spread across Bharat, which were interconnected, and in these akhadas the muscle power of war was nurtured. These akhadas were generally found beside Hanuman temples, as he is the god invoked before exercising and training. Then groups like Jugantar Group, Anushilan Samiti, Abhinav Bharat and the Gadarites were created. The Gadarites were in Canada and northeast of America. These groups carried out attack on the British infrastructure and murdered British officials for their deeds. Then some Shubhachintaks of the British who were in those groups started telling information to the British. Then it was time to cleanse these groups. A series of murders, or shall I call it executions, of the traitors of the motherland were carried out across Canada, Europe and India. After finding and plotting the members of these organizations, the British caught hold of the prominent members and then put them in one of the hells on earth, the cellular jail of Andaman. Look at this. If you were in one of these cells, you couldn't see the person in the cell in front of you, the one besides you. The food in this jail was the same for men and dogs. Heat, rain, cold, fever, hunger. In any condition, the revolutionaries were made to work in the machines, and if the quota wasn't filled, then terrible punishments were given. Savarkar especially was tortured because he was a prominent leader in the freedom fight. He was placed in the cell which is at the end of the petal of the flower-like jail, and every Saturday 3 freedom fighters were hung in front of his cell, and he was made to watch it because the British wanted to hurt and break this man. Due to the civil disobedience movement, many of the revolutionaries were let out of the jail. But they didn't go back to rest after the torture, but to raise their swords in the name of Chamunda and Bhavani Devi, as many of them were Shakta followers. After the First World War, the revolutionaries saw an opportunity to repeat the events of 1857. They decided to carry out a revolt across the world because the Indian troops were scattered all over the globe. But unfortunately, because of some Shubhachintak of the Britishers, this attempt failed. After hearing the news of what these bloody Indians are plotting, the Britishers rampaged their way through the houses of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh and Bengal and shot down and killed many revolutionaries who were part of Anushilan Samiti, Jugantar organization and the Gadarites. The Anglo-Afghan wars were actually the attempts of the Gadarites to weaken the British Indian army in the Punjab region so that they can attack the British government severely. The Jallianwala Bagh incident was actually an attempt by the British to shoot down the Ghadarites in the area around the Jallianwala Bagh, which was in Punjab. Such a brutal act. The Britishers knew that the members of the Ghadarites and the HRA would be present in the areas near Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. The HRA, Hindustan Republican Army, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev were three youngsters who laid down their lives to make the deaf British hear. They were also the part of HRA. HRA was responsible for carrying out many operations against the British. While it seemed like all hope was lost, a Bengali youngster fled to Germany after meeting Veer Savarkar, the man who brought forward the idea of a military revolution. When this Bengali youngster was asked the name by Hitler himself, he answered, Subhash Chandra Bose. He fought his way through every obstacle and finally formed the Indian National Army, which was a dream of many revolutionaries before him, like Savarkar, Bagha Jatin, Sachindranath Sanyal and the Ghosh brothers. With the help of the Japanese, the INA tried its best to fight their way till Delhi, guns blazing. But unfortunately, they failed. 45,000 soldiers, some laid down their lives, others were captured and tortured in the dungeons of the Red Fort and many other places. Some of these are the ancestors of the cricketers and actors and politicians which we see nowadays. The INA shook the British Empire to its very roots as the base on which its government stood on was turned against them, the army. And then in 1946, a voice was heard on the radio of the ships which sailed from the Gulf of Aden till Indonesia. We are joining the revolution. After hearing the word of revolution, the soldiers took down the Union Jack and there fluttered the Tiranga. The entire British Indian Navy had now become the Revolutionary Indian Navy. The last hack at the trunk of the British Empire trembled the hearts of the British as the events of the 1857 war flashed in front of their eyes. The British understood that it was time for the final act. The partition, the transfer of power to their Indian friends and exit with the last of the loot which brought Bharat from being the 30% contributor to the world GDP to 4%. A country is judged on the basis of their performance throughout history. Looking at our neighbors who find themselves in chaos and underdevelopment while they got independence in the same time as we did and comparing it to our performance, we have made wonders. India has fought 5 wars on and for the motherland, won 4, lost 1, but today we are politically so strong that China can't even afford to go to war with India. A very happy Independence Day to you all. Swatantrata Din ki hardik shubhkamnaएं. Let us strip off all the remaining virus of mental colonization. Embrace our culture. Be proud of it. Let's help each other and leave behind all the differences and divisions which the British divided us into. Let's embrace science, embed spirituality and lead this country to a bright future. Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya. Bharat Mata ki Jai. Vande Mataram.